Breaking tonight, the UK election polls are indicating a shocking development for British Prime Minister Theresa May's Conservative Party. Her party could lose its parliamentary majority. If confirmed, it would be a huge blow for Prime Minister May, who called a snap election in April, and the whole idea was that she would pick up an even greater majority heading into the Brexit future for the United Kingdom. So this vote could trigger what's called a hung parliament, which could plunge the United Kingdom into political uncertainty during a time when they have too much of that already. The news of this exit poll information has sent the British pound tumbling. We'll get you more on this as we get it throughout the show tonight. And good evening from Washington, D.C., the only place where you will ever see the particular brand of drama that we witnessed today.
The administration then chose to defame me and, more importantly, the FBI by saying that the organization was in disarray, that it was poorly led, that the workforce had lost confidence in its leader. Those were lies, plain and simple.
Do you have any doubt that Russia attempted to interfere in the 2016 elections?
None.
Did any individual working for this administration, including the Justice Department, ask you to stop the Russian investigation?
No.
You ever wonder why, of all the things in this investigation, the only thing that's never been leaked is the fact that the president was not personally under investigation, despite the fact that both Democrats and Republicans and the leadership of Congress knew that and have known that for weeks?
I don't know.
James Comey and President Trump, who, although not in the room, went mano a mano in a very fierce he said kind of battle today. The president so far staying silent, letting his lawyer do most of the talking and the counterpunching. Watch.
The president never, in form or substance, directed or suggested that Mr. Comey stop investigating anyone. The president also never told Mr. Comey, quote, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty," close quote. He never said it in form, and he never said it in substance. Mr. Comey has now admitted that he is one of these leakers.
Wow, fascinating stuff today. Paul Ryan argued that the president's alleged request to, quote, lift the cloud was basically a rookie error.
The president's new at this. He's new to government. And so he probably wasn't steeped in the long-running protocols that establish the relationships between DOJ, FBI, and White Houses. He's just new to this.
Here to respond live from our bureau in Washington, D.C. is Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president. Kellyanne, thank you for being here today. So did the president watch this testimony live today?
So today at the White House was business as usual. The president hosted his usual array of meetings. He had the White House Infrastructure Summit. I and a couple other senior staffers accompanied him to the Faith and Freedom Conference, where he received multiple standing ovations for standing up for religious liberty, for even talking about
the
withdrawal from the Paris Accords. He's aware of the testimony. He had a lot of meetings this morning with his national security team, Secretaries Mattis and Tillerson, General McMaster. Also attended a couple of private policy meetings. So he, of course, every single day is doing something at that White House to move his agenda forward. And today was no different. I do want to make the case to everyone that whereas Washington said it was just going to shut down, literally people took the day off from work to watch this, the president did not. He worked for the American people. On infrastructure, he has committed at least $200 million and probably upwards of $1 trillion for these public-private partnerships to restore our crumbling bridges and roads, and also to make a more modern, better run, more accessible, less hassle, more hassle-free, I should say, airline system, that people will spend less time on the tarmac, will have a safer, more sure system. That affects all travelers, and in fact, that's a nonpartisan issue. It would be great to have some bipartisan support on things like infrastructure.
So, just to get back to his reaction to all of this, though, and I understand that business went ahead as usual. He had a lot of meetings today, and he wants very much to keep the agenda moving forward, is doing everything that he can to do that. Nonetheless, this testimony was significant today. What was his response to the things that he did hear from it, or the pieces of it that he did see?
Well, at the White House, we've been referring everyone, Martha, to his private lawyer Mark Kasowitz. And today, I'm happy to report, I can actually refer you to Mark Kasowitz, the president's private lawyer's statement, and you ran some of it then. Yeah. I really would tell the public, if you want to see the full statement from Mark Kasowitz, go ahead and pull it up. It's on, I'm sure you can access it publicly, if not through the White House website. And it's an important statement because it reflects, the president's opinion reflects his lawyer's characterization of this particular testimony. But I think it's important because, you know, if this were like a classic legal case, you'd have one side go and then the other side go. That's not how congressional testimony works. The other side does not respond, and so it's very important that Mark Kasowitz responded instead.
When he did respond, he responded to two very specific things. He said the president never said, you know, I hope we can get past this with regard to the Comey testimony. And he also said that the president never asked Jim Comey for a pledge of loyalty. So now you have a situation where Jim Comey says he wrote all these copious notes. He's declared what he says happened in the room. We heard Mark Kasowitz, the statement that you referred to, saying what the president's recollection of all of that was. So, you know, today we heard Jim Comey say, Lordy, I hope there are tapes. So are there tapes of these discussions of the president and Jim Comey?
I can't comment on that, but I would really, everybody who's going to look at Jim Comey's testimony should also look at Mark Kasowitz's statement. I think that's important in this case. The other thing I would just mention is that
why can't you comment on whether or not there are tapes?
Because I can't comment. I work in the White House.
But if there are no tapes, then wouldn't you just say there are no tapes?
I can't comment on that. And actually, the president himself has said he won't comment any further on that.
All right. In terms of the agenda, you know, given everything that's going on with this testimony that we saw today, what's the White House's plan in terms of, you know, the next few weeks? Because obviously you'd love to head into the 4th of July with other things to point to and say, you know, we're getting somewhere in healthcare in the Senate.
Yes.
What's your plan for the next few weeks?
Sure. Thanks for asking, Martha, because, you know, my main grievance is not just biased media coverage. I think that's easy for Americans to see when they want to find it. We're seeing a lot of it in the last couple of days, in fact. My grievance is always incomplete coverage. So thanks for at least giving us a platform to talk about all the other issues that have real people impact.
The American people do care about all of these things.
Absolutely, and it impacts them.
And a lot of them are frustrated with the lack of, you know, things that they can actually look at as achievements so far from the White House. So what can they expect?
Pardon me. So yesterday the president went to Cincinnati, Ohio, and he had around him people who are actual victims of Obamacare, reminding us why it's so important to get rid of this plan that did not help all Americans. It said it would help. And you see these Obamacare victims, you realize the importance of having increased quality, increased access, lower prices. Some people have had the worst possible outcome when it came to Obamacare. They had this health insurance card that they literally could not use because the premiums were so high they couldn't afford to use it. And so healthcare is moving apace in the Senate. Leader McConnell and his team feel very confident that they will be able to get a vote sometime soon, and that package is moving forward.
Sometime soon, meaning I know he met with leadership the other day at the White House, so sometime over the course of the summer you expect
could be the summer before the August recess. But, you know, we've been living with Obamacare for a very long time, 7 years, and it takes a long time to turn a sinking battleship. But that aside, this is still Infrastructure and Jobs Month, so the president will continue to go on the road and take his case directly to the people, continue to announce special projects. Just today, he met with governors, municipal leaders like mayors, and also tribal leaders, trying to institute this public-private partnership for infrastructure. Why? Because if you just move the money from the federal government to the state government, you're just moving the funding source. What he's trying to do is spur that innovation and that investment closer to home, so that, say, just hypothetically, the federal government provides 20% of the funding, you're encouraging to get the other 80% through that private piece, and you're encouraging those mayors and those governors and those tribal leaders, Martha, who are closer to those who will invest the money, who will create the jobs, who will execute and complete the projects. It's very exciting, actually. This was called stimulus under President Obama. A fraction, I've read, 10% of the money actually made it to infrastructure. The rest just goes in these big black hole programs in Washington, D.C. that don't really fix those roads and bridges, don't build things. We don't build things anymore. And he and Secretary Elaine Chao tomorrow, Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao tomorrow, will have a big roads and rails recovery infrastructure announcement at the Department of Transportation. People should really tune in to listen to that because it affects every single person in this country as they try to move from point A to point B in a more seamless, safer way.
Before I let you go, the president said today that he's under siege. What has he told all of you at the White House in terms of how to deal with what is simply not going away anytime soon?
Well, we're dealing with the agenda. I mean, I'm just one person there, and I was in 6 different policy meetings today, including a few with him and a few with the vice president. So we're just plodding forward. And in addition, the other items are the budget, spending and certainly tax reform. You've heard Secretaries Mnuchin and Ross and Director Cohn. They put the principles out there. By law, the Senate has to score through the CBO. It's, you know, it's plan before you go forward, the health care plan before you go forward, tax plan this calendar year, possibly after the August recess. I don't think the calendar is as important as the principles that are laid out. And
so
we
not
as a
so
nation,
much an inspirational message from him to you guys, but just keep on your work.
But he knows we don't need inspiration because nobody there is what the reports say we are, which is downtrodden, staff shakeup. Where is that? We've been hearing this for 4.5 months. It's completely ridiculous. The president continues to move forward with his team every single day on behalf of the American people I know are watching. And very importantly, everybody who is supposed to be allegedly in the doghouse still works in the White House. And I want everybody to really focus on that.
Including Jeff Sessions, who I hear is not going anywhere anytime soon,
and the president has confidence in people who work for him. And it's very simple, just as everybody around here assumes that their bosses have confidence in them because they're working here. But I also just wanted to mention that we as a country every year spend about 7 billion hours and $250 billion complying with the tax code. That just has to stop. We have to simplify it and modernize it and make it fair to small business owners and unleash that investment. He's also doing a lot on energy. So it's just a very exciting time if people would focus beyond the silly, unfounded gossip and who's testifying on which day and really focus on the real people impact.
Kellyanne, thank you for coming up to the rooftop with us. Good to see you tonight. Have a good night. Thank you. As just a few minutes earlier, up here on the roof, joining me now with more, Mark Thiessen, who served as chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush and is a Fox News contributor, and Zach Pecanis, former senior DNC advisor. Zach, let me start with you. You watched the testimony today. Obviously, the White House wants to get back to the agenda, but obviously what happened today was an important, big deal.
It was a huge deal, and I think it was a really bad day for the White House for a couple of reasons. The first is that James Comey came out and said that he believes that the reason that he was fired was because Donald Trump wanted to change the trajectory, change the direction of the Russia investigation. That is a huge admission and a big, big problem for this White House. And the second thing that's going to be a problem for this White House in the long term is that people are saying right now that, well, he said that Donald Trump wasn't under investigation when he was asked, and that's true. But what he did suggest very strongly, and some are saying that it's actually a confirmation that he is currently under investigation because of obstruction of justice. In fact, he did, and actually that is corroborated by McCabe.
What he said was, because I'm no longer there, I can't speak to now because I don't work there anymore. Exactly. But I can confirm that he was never under any investigation.
What he actually said is that that's a conclusion I'm sure the special counsel will work towards to try and understand what the intention was there and whether that's an offense. He was talking about obstruction of justice, and that's corroborated by the fact of what McCabe said yesterday in his testimony that said that is either part of a criminal investigation or likely to become part of a criminal investigation, the conversation between the President of the United States and Mr. Comey. This was not good news for the White House today.
Good grief. I mean, it's just the whole point of this exercise was that Donald Trump somehow colluded with Vladimir Putin to steal our election from the American people. And that's been, Comey blew that out of the water today. Donald Trump said several times, in fact, the CNN headline yesterday that Brit Hume tweeted out, in testimony, Comey will dispute President Trump's blanket claim that he was told he wasn't under investigation. In fact, the headline, if anybody's honest, is going to be Comey confirms that Donald Trump is not under investigation and that he did not interfere with the Russia probe at all. There's all this discussion is about the Flynn investigation, which Comey testified today is completely separate from the Russia investigation, and you just move seamlessly from one thing to the next. Why do you do that?
That's absolutely not true. What he did confirm is that there is an investigation into the campaign that is led by Donald Trump.
No, he said Donald Trump is not under investigation. Will you say it with me? Donald Trump is not under investigation.
What he said is that Donald Trump was not under investigation at the time that. No, I mean, but that is point me to the place where he says that Donald Trump is currently not under investigation. Point me to that place in the testimony.
At the point,
he said it several times.
He did not say that he is not currently under investigation. He said he was not under investigation at the time he was asked.
I got fired. I don't have the job anymore, so I can't speak to the period that happened after I left. That's just a logical conclusion to make. But let me ask you this politically. You know, you look at there's two ways to look at this, very clearly laid out by both of you. Do you think that this is going to continue? I mean, are Democrats going to continue to sort of make this the focus of every living, breathing breath that they have? Or are they willing to get involved in the kind of things that Kellyanne was just talking about, like infrastructure and tax reform, and to try to get something else done?
Look, our candidates are going out there and they're talking about health care and the disastrous Republican plan to take away health care from 24 million Americans. However, the Russia investigation remains a very important piece about what we need to do to protect our republic and to protect our democracy from foreign interference. And that is going to continue.
Time is spent discussing the larger picture
That's
of what you just said.
Exactly right. So this is what's so destructive about what Zach and some of the Democrats are doing with this, is that it is a fact that the Russians didn't try to interfere with our investigation. They wanted to sow chaos and confusion and undermine the legitimacy of our government. And all the people who are trying to use this investigation to undermine Donald Trump are, in fact, inadvertently colluding with the Russians to help them do that. So they should stop.
All right, I got to leave it there. Thanks, you guys. Zach and Mark, good to see you both. So breaking tonight, we are watching what is turning out to be a shocking election in the United Kingdom tonight. Exit polls show British Prime Minister Theresa May could lose the parliamentary majority that she has. A live report coming up on that. But first, one of the most talked about moments from today, the revelation that the former FBI director leaked information personally to the press. So did he break the law, given that those were federal documents? Senator James Risch and constitutional law attorney Jonathan Turley up next.
You said after you were dismissed, you gave information to a friend so that friend could get that information into the public media.
Correct.
What kind of information was that? What kind of information did you give to a friend?
So the question is, did he or didn't he commit obstruction of justice? It's the million-dollar question that seems to remain unanswered tonight about President Trump after hours of detailed testimony from fired FBI Director James Comey. Our next guest drilled down hard for an answer to that question today, and it is now one of the most talked about exchanges that happened this morning. Watch this.
He did not direct you to let it go.
Not in his words, no.
He did not order you to let it go.
Again, those words are not an order.
No. He said, I hope. Now, like me, you probably did hundreds of cases, maybe thousands of cases, charging people with criminal offenses. And, of course, you have knowledge of the thousands of cases out there that where people have been charged. Do you know of any case where a person has been charged for obstruction of justice, or for that matter, any other criminal offense, where they said or thought they hoped for an outcome?
I don't know well enough to answer. And the reason I keep saying his words is I took it as a direction.
Right.
I mean, this is the President of the United States with me alone saying, I hope this. I took it as this is what he wants me to do. Now, I didn't obey that, but that's the way I took it.
You may have taken it as a direction, but that's not what he said.
Correct. That's what
he said, I hope.
Those are exact words, okay. Correct.
You don't know of anyone that's ever been charged for hoping something. Is that a fair statement?
I don't, as I sit here.
You're now Idaho Republican Senator James Risch. Good to see you tonight, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
He's saying that the way that he interpreted it was that he was getting a lot of pressure put on him in that moment, and you're saying that what really matters only are the words themselves.
Well, look, the president said words. Words matter. Jim Comey was sitting there. Jim Comey's a lawyer. He's a good wordsmith. If you look at the document that he put out for us, the 7 pages, he was very explicit. He was exacting in his language. The president said he hoped for an outcome. Now, Mr. Comey said, and Mr. Comey's a good lawyer, that he took it a different way. Look, this is the big leagues. This can't be mushy. If he thought the president meant something different than what he actually said, he should have said, well, Mr. President, exactly what do you mean? Or, Mr. President, are you telling me I should do this? You can't just sit and let this mush up. I mean, this is very specific.
And when he went home that night, you know, he perhaps would have made the choice to go talk to someone about it. I don't understand why was Jeff Sessions left out of the loop on all of this, do you think? His boss.
Well, Jim Comey had to do more than what he did if indeed he believed that the president was giving him some direction that was different than what his words were.
Do you believe that he is under an ongoing obstruction of justice investigation, as our last guest just said, was established today? Is that what you heard?
Well, I sure didn't hear that. I mean, you've got an expert next to talk about obstruction of justice. I'm a prosecutor. I prosecuted lots and lots of cases. You can't prosecute somebody for hoping something. It doesn't work. I've never heard of a case like that.
What about the fact that James Comey today admitted to leaking information, which were his notes, which, as I understand it, become federal documents because they're written as an account between the FBI director and the President of the United States?
Well, it shouldn't have been done that way. If Mr. Comey wanted to put those out, he should have just put out a press release and put them out. Kudos to him for admitting that he did it, but it should have been done a different way. There's no question about that.
Does it raise questions in your mind about whether or not he was behind other leaks?
No, not really. I can't go that far with it. And Martha, look, what's lost here on a lot of this is just a slice of what our Intelligence Committee is doing. We have a bipartisan committee, Republicans and Democrats, who understand how serious this matter is of the Russian attempt to influence our election. There's a number of us that are prosecutors on there. We've done hundreds of investigations. This is not unfamiliar ground with us. We're going to take this to wherever the facts lead. And we're going to write a report. We're going to tell the American people what the Russians did, and we're going to talk about how we can do something about this and fix it and make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Senator Risch, thank you very much, and
thank
happy
you.
anniversary.
Thank you very much.
Happy 49th anniversary to the Risches. Thank you very much, sir. All right, here with more, Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney and law professor at George Washington University, joins us as well up here on the rooftop. Thanks for being here tonight, Jonathan. I want to play a little bit of sound as we dig in here. Let's play that.
Do you sense that the president was trying to obstruct justice or just seek for a way for Mike Flynn to save face, given he had already been fired?
I don't think it's for me to say whether the conversation I had with the president was an effort to obstruct. I took it as a very disturbing thing, very concerning, but that's a conclusion I'm sure the special counsel will work towards.
What do you think?
It's not obstruction of justice. It's not even particularly close. Obstruction of justice is a crime. It has elements. The senator is absolutely correct. There isn't any case that was ever prosecuted on these types of facts. And so the question is, how significant is it that the president allegedly said these things? It is, in my view, inappropriate for some of these things to have been said if they were said. But we have to distinguish between what is a crime or what's impeachable and what is bad form. You know, you don't get indicted or impeached because you're, clueless or because you're rude or because you say unguarded, ill-advised things. And so people
As an American, you have a right to be rude and say unguarded things, right?
Well, so the problem with the obstruction argument is that it doesn't fit the code. There's no evidence that there was an attempt to obstruct an actual pending proceeding. There's no evidence that this conduct would constitute what's called corruptly influencing a proceeding. And so when you hear these types of issues of, as the senator said, what was his precise words? Words do matter because words are what constitute the elements of crimes. Those elements aren't here.
What about the dinner description of, I need your loyalty. I would like your loyalty. He describes it almost as sort of a, Tony Soprano, as it was mentioned before, kind of moment where he says, it was very clear to me what he was trying to do. He's trying to put the screws to me on this.
Even if that's true, sounding like Tony Soprano doesn't make you Tony Soprano. And I'm sure that the president will say that he was meaning something different. As a criminal defense attorney, it seems to me rather obvious what he might have been talking about. I mean, the president at that point was being pummeled by leaks. There were people in the administration, there still are, who are leaking information against his administration. It's having a big impact. And
were you concerned about the leak, by the way, that James Comey admitted to today?
I'm very concerned about it. The thing is, I'm not too sure why this has gone to the wayside. There's a strong argument to be made that those memos are government documents. Yeah. He wrote the memo on an FBI computer in the course of his service as FBI director about a matter under his jurisdiction. To say that that is somehow like a diary entry is rather crazy.
The irony of this, when you look back at the Hillary Clinton investigation, is very rich. I mean, to say that everything that transpired on that server, which was outside of her domain, is government property because she did it as, Secretary of State and was removing these government documents to this exposed place, which was something he was deeply involved in, and then argue that these notes don't fall under that seems odd.
Well, that's the question, I think, for James Comey. Is this the rule that you would apply to all FBI agents, that if they simply write something on a government computer to themselves, it becomes their property? And even if it were, why would you have to then give it to a professor to give to the media? I think it raises very significant ethical problems. I think it violates department regulations. It can even be a federal offense.
Jonathan Turley, thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight. So when we come back, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell and former Assistant Director to the FBI Ron Hosko are here on what is next for this Russia investigation when we come back on the rooftop in D.C. with more of the story.
Why do you believe you were fired?
I don't know for sure. I believe I take the president at his word that I was fired because of the Russia investigation.
Breaking tonight, the leaks are one of the main headlines that came out of today's testimony by former FBI Director James Comey. President Trump has denounced leaks left and right, but tonight there are some new questions swirling about what info was not leaked. Watch this.
Do you ever wonder why, of all the things in this investigation, the only thing that's never been leaked is the fact that the president was not personally under investigation, despite the fact that both Democrats and Republicans and the leadership of Congress knew that and have known that for weeks?
I don't know. I find matters that are briefed to the Gang of Eight are pretty tightly held, in my experience.
Here now, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, who sits on the House Intelligence Committee, and he joins me here. Good to see you this evening. I thought that was a pretty interesting moment, because you look back on the leaks that happened to the New York Times, one of which was that James Comey had been asked to make a loyalty pledge, and then right after that you had the president saying, well, James Comey better hope there are no tapes, and then that was followed up by the memos. And yet the one thing that the president kept wanting to get out there, which was, can you please let them know I'm not under investigation, is the only thing that never got leaked.
Well, maybe he was following Director Comey's advice, which was not to talk about an investigation, otherwise the director would have to prove a negative. And so I think the most damaging thing was, though, that he sought the director's loyalty, that he wanted his friend's case to go away. But James Comey was leaking things about the investigation.
I don't think he was leaking anything.
He admitted it today. He said, I put my memos out there because I wanted to make sure that people knew my side of the story.
James Comey was a private citizen when that was disclosed, so as long as he disclosed something that was unclassified, I don't think there's a problem. And he said today, after the hearing, as I understand, that he hopes the memos become public, which they should.
Interestingly, he said, I wanted them to be leaked because I wanted there to be a special prosecutor.
Well, we certainly should have a special prosecutor, and now we do. But, this investigation now is in the hands of Bob Mueller. On the House investigation, we just hope that we can conduct an honest one that makes progress and that is independent, and that the president stays out of the way. He has caused more trouble by getting in the way of the FBI's investigation and the House Intelligence Committee's investigation. I hope he's learned his lesson and lets us proceed.
So why do you think it's unusual that he would want them to speak about the fact that he was not under investigation, given the fact that there was, as he said, this cloud hanging over? He wanted to be able to get on with his agenda. Doesn't that seem like a fairly reasonable thing to want? He's been told it 3 times directly by the FBI director, which he confirmed today, and yet that was the one thing that the FBI director wasn't willing to help get off of him.
And the reason Director Comey gave, I think, was a valid one. And so the president's team was under investigation, and that's what I think is important here, is the timeline. The president learns his team is under investigation at the very latest on March 20, when Director Comey tells Congress that. And then when you follow the timeline, Director Comey is called by the president and asked to lift the cloud around the Russia investigation, and then is shortly fired thereafter. I think the dots here connect to Director Comey wouldn't do what the president wanted, and so he was fired.
Interesting that, he said, I couldn't do it because then there would be a duty to correct if we reopened, or if we opened for the first time, rather, an investigation into the president.
And we've been there before, right?
Exactly. I mean, when you look back at last summer, so you have to ask yourself why, on the one hand, with the Clinton investigation, he wanted to protect them from having to get a special prosecutor, and in this case, he wanted to turn over information that he hoped would lead to that. Doesn't that seem like a double standard?
Well, maybe the director also evolved and understood, what that did to the country, right or wrong. So I wouldn't look too deeply into that.
Eric Swalwell, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Good to have you here today. So joining me now on my left on the rooftop here is Ron Hosko, former assistant director to the FBI. Ron, you're listening to the conversation. You watched the testimony today. What stands out to you?
Well, first, the director's opening commentary, which I thought was very powerful in talking to the FBI employees. I communicated with a friend who's still, been there for a number of years on the way over here tonight, and she said it moved her to tears. That connected with me, too. The way he was terminated and his ability now to talk to the workforce before this committee. And I think, too, that he was reserved. I think this to me was not an over-the-top presentation. He was very thoughtful and of the senator's questions and answered them narrowly. He confined his answers in a way that tried to avoid speculation about, he doesn't know what was in the president's head. He was telling us how he interpreted those comments. So I thought he was subdued, he was somber.
When you listen to him take you through those moments where he feels that he's being pressured to see his way clear, to drop an investigation, and yet he doesn't tell anyone that. He doesn't go to Jeff Sessions. He doesn't say to the president in that moment, you know what, Mr. President, as Paul Ryan says, I know you're new here to a lot of the relationships and how things work in Washington, but you simply cannot even suggest that to me. Why would Jim Comey, he's a big guy and he's been around a long time, why would he not have the backbone to do that?
Well, he's today struggled with that answer. That maybe a stronger person or a better person would be able to do it just that way. Again, I'm trying to put myself in Jim Comey's shoes. Imagine yourself in that moment in the Oval Office or sitting in the green room with the President of the United States, and this suddenly comes up. And you're trying to process, what is he asking me for here? So I guess I have to give Jim Comey, having worked for him, my bias is, of course, with Jim Comey, who I have great respect for. I have to give him that space to try to process that in the moment, and we now know what happened in his version.
Do you think it's interesting that he said that he wanted to trigger a special prosecutor? What do you make of that?
Well, first, and I'll differ with your colleague or my colleague here, I think this, on the face of it, was a leak of information by Jim Comey. Whether it was a leak of classified, I don't think so. Was it an impermissible leak of something that was privileged? I absolutely don't think so. And as a private citizen, I think he was in a position to leak it, but in its purest terms, it was a leak. Why he didn't leak it directly or do it directly, we don't know. Why he didn't go to a Senate leadership person and give it to them, we don't know. But by his understanding of events and his decision, he wanted to trigger a special prosecutor. Frankly, people across this town have been calling for that for weeks before, myself included.
Ron, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Always good to have you here. So also breaking tonight, we are watching what's turning out to be a very interesting election in the United Kingdom. Exit polls are showing that British Prime Minister Theresa May could lose this parliamentary majority. A live report coming up. But first, more of the Comey testimony today. Karl Rove and Bill Bennett on the biggest moments as they saw them when we come back.
Did the president ask you what you should be doing or what our government should be doing to protect America against Russian interference in our election system?
I don't recall a conversation like that.
Why didn't you stop and say, Mr. President, this is wrong. I cannot discuss this with you?
It's a great question. Maybe if I were stronger, I would have. I was so stunned by the conversation that I just took it in. And the only thing I could think to say, because I was playing in my mind, because I was going to remember every word he said, I was playing in my mind, what should my response be? And that's why I very carefully chose the words. And look, I've seen the tweet about tapes. Lordy, I hope there are tapes.
Lordy, I hope there are tapes, he says, in the wake of this explosive day on Capitol Hill behind me from the fired FBI Director James Comey. Speculation's mounting tonight about one defining moment that could go down in history. from today's hearing. What will people be talking about in the years to come? Here now, Karl Rove, Deputy Chief of Staff to former President George W. Bush, and Bill Bennett, former Education Secretary. Both are Fox News contributors. So we have that moment that we just watched, Jim Comey sort of self-reflective in that moment, thinking about why he did or didn't make a different choice there. And I want to play one other moment, and then I'm going to get Bill Bennett to react to both of them, because this is the one that he said stood out for him. So let's play that.
The president tweeted on Friday, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
That might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. Bill Bennett, what do you think?
Knocked me out of my chair. You know, the president's sitting there talking to him. We know on several occasions talking about leaks and what can we do about these leaks. And Comey's leaking. Comey gets out of the job and leaks. But, you know, he wants to get it in the public square and wakes up in the middle of the night, but he doesn't do it himself. He gets to this Columbia law professor because he's worried about seagulls here, the press, picking at him. It just knocked me out of my chair. Leaks are, you know, maybe the only indictable, probably the only indictable offense in all of this. And turns out Comey is a leaker. This was an extraordinary moment to me, and I think this will be part of the history that when it's written. By the way, can we get rid of this locution about Comey needs to find his space and spaces, and they're crying at the FBI? And what do they need at the FBI? Safe spaces, puppies, Raffi music, Play-Doh? I mean, come on, let's grow up here. All this self-reflection, all this psychobabble, let's get in the real world. John Turley, your professor, is in the real world, and he thinks these leaks may well be a violation of law. I think he's right.
Karl, what do you think?
I agree. Frankly, look, the piece of tape that you ran at Comey, I can't make heads or tails of it. It sounds to me like he woke up in the middle of the night saying, how am I going to get my revenge on that SOB in the Oval Office? And decided to leak accordingly. This was a petulant response. If the best thing that he should have done if he was the self-righteous, only honest man in town that he claims to be, would have been to have left the president's tweet unresponded to.
I thought it was so interesting, Karl, that, just back to Karl for just one moment, that he said, he was asked, during the Bush administration, you wrote a letter of resignation because you felt so strongly about what transpired at the hospital with John Ashcroft, and I don't want to get all into that story right now, but so why didn't you do the same in this instance if you felt that it was so egregious and you were so concerned about what you were hearing from the president? To Karl and then to Bill.
Well, look, again, it doesn't make sense. Comey, I think the only legitimate answer is not that Comey was somehow frightened into inaction by sitting across the table from Donald J. Trump. I think it never crossed his mind that was inappropriate. Look, the president is the head of the executive branch. If the president directed him to end a particular investigation, don't investigate Flynn, he would have to say yes, and if he didn't like it, resign. Now, it would create a political problem for the president if he did that, but it would not create a legal problem. The director of the FBI is not a completely independent force unto himself. We had a guy like that. His name was J. Edgar Hoover, and he did a lot of things that, in retrospect, because he thought he was completely independent of political control, were not good.
Bill.
Yeah. Karl is absolutely right, and I'm glad he brought it up. My old professor, Alan Dershowitz, has been writing about this for weeks. He's been going crazy. I heard him on Fox talking about it today. If he had directed, all this stuff about did he obstruct, well, the I hope language, I hope you'll see your way clear on Flynn. If he had said, drop the Flynn investigation, that would be perfectly constitutional, perfectly legal. Not prudent. And politically there'd be fallout, but he can do it. Here's the observation I would make. I'd be interested in Karl's reaction. We heard a lot of the I word coming up to today. I didn't hear it much today at all. I think the Democrats, and I've watched them on your show and others, are scrambling a little bit. I think they realize they've lost a lot of their case, and some of it because of what Comey himself said today.
Let me just mention that we have John Roberts is now reporting that Jared Kushner is in discussions to testify in front of the Senate Intel Committee. Carl, what's your read on, on why that would be, why they're going forward with that? He's always said that he would be happy to do that. Interesting that it comes on the heels of what we saw today.
Yeah, look, if there's nothing there, it is better for them to get out there and say there's nothing there, to explain what happened in his meeting with the ambassador, to explain what happened in his meeting with the representatives of the VEB, the state-controlled bank that he met with that's under sanctions from the United States. And transparency in this would be better, as long as it is, A, guided by the lawyers, and B, is done in a fair environment. To pick up just a second on what Bill said, look, there has to be an element of corruption in order for this to be involved in an obstruction of justice. And what's the corruption in saying, look, I just fired the guy. He's been completely humiliated, driven out of government. There'd have to be some element of corruption involved in that. Like, Flynn had money, got money from the Russians for appearing at a speech in Moscow, and he shared them with Trump. That would have to be something like that present in it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Bill Bennett, thank you so much. Good to see you tonight. Carl Rove, always a pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen. So coming up tonight at 10 o'clock, Donald Trump Jr. will join Sean Hannity and hear what he has to say about Comey's testimony today. That is tonight at 10 o'clock. Look forward to that with Sean Hannity and Donald Trump Jr. In the meantime, breaking tonight, the British election is turning out to be more of a cliffhanger than expected. We'll go live to London for this big story tonight, next.